Somewhere under the hills of southern Missouri, right now, water is moving through a passage that no human being has ever seen. That is not a figure of speech, and it is not a legend. It is a straightforward description of the situation. There is a second landscape underneath the Ozarks. It is enormous, it is full of moving water, and it has never been fully mapped. Not by the state, not by the federal government, not by anybody. We know it is there because of what comes out of it. And to understand how that is possible, in a country that has photographed every square foot of its surface from orbit, you have to start with the fact that the ground here is not like other ground in America. It is older, and it has been left alone longer, and both of those things turn out to matter enormously. Start with the age. The core of the Ozarks is Precambrian igneous and metamorphic rock, and the origins of it run back on the order of 1.5 billion years. Some of the oldest rock exposed anywhere on the continent is sitting in southeast Missouri, in the San Francois Mountains, where you can walk up and put your hand on it. To put that in some kind of perspective, these hills were already ancient before there were trees, before there were animals on land. The Appalachians, which everybody calls old, were still in the future. But the age alone is not the interesting part. The interesting part is what did not happen here. Two things, and they are the whole story. The first is that the Ozark Dome is one of the rare parts of North America that has not been drowned by shallow seas since very early geologic time. Enormous stretches of this continent went under warm inland oceans repeatedly for tens of millions of years at a stretch. The Ozarks largely stayed up. The second is that it was never glaciated. During the ice ages, the sheets came down across the middle of the continent, scraping everything flat, filling in valleys, resetting the drainage of entire regions. They came south, and they stopped just north of here. So picture what that means: a block of very old rock, lifted up, never scoured by ice, never buried under sea floor, sitting exposed to rain for an amount of time that is genuinely difficult to hold in your head. And the rock on top of that ancient core is limestone and dolomite, which is soluble, which is the entire point. Rain is very slightly acidic. Limestone dissolves in slightly acidic water, not quickly, almost imperceptibly. But run rainwater through cracks in limestone for tens of millions of years, uninterrupted, with no ice to reset the process, and the cracks become joints, and the joints become passages, and the passages become a network. That process has a name: karst. And the Ozarks is one of the great karst landscapes on Earth. Here is where the numbers stop sounding like geology and start sounding like something else. Missouri has roughly 7,300 recorded caves. Recorded. The majority of them are in the Ozarks, and that word recorded is doing a tremendous amount of work, because a cave gets recorded when somebody finds the entrance, reports it, and it goes into a register. It does not get recorded when it has no entrance. It does not get recorded when the entrance is a crack behind a rockfall on private land where nobody has walked in 90 years. It does not get recorded when it is entirely below the water table, and there is no way in without diving gear and a great deal of nerve. Inside Ozark National Scenic Riverways alone, a single protected corridor along 2 rivers, over 300 caves have been identified, and they range from something barely bigger than an overhang to one system with nearly 7 miles of mapped passage. 7 miles. In one cave, inside one park, in a state with 7,300 recorded and an unknown number that are not. But caves are only the part you can walk into. The water is the part that tells you the real scale. Big Spring in southern Missouri is the largest single outlet spring in the United States. Its average flow is around 13 million gallons a day. Sit with that figure, because most people hear it and it slides straight past. 13 million gallons a day, coming out of one hole in a hillside every day, continuously. Not from a river, not from a lake, not from a reservoir anybody built. It comes out of the rock. Greer Spring is not far behind. Mammoth Spring, across in Arkansas, is another. The region is one of the most spring-rich areas anywhere in the world. Now ask the obvious question, which is the one this whole video is actually about. Where is it coming from? Because water at that volume is not appearing out of nothing. It is falling as rain across a very large area, sinking into the ground through sinkholes and losing streams and cracks, traveling through the rock and coming out somewhere else. Which means that between the place it goes in and the place it comes out, there is a route. A physical, real, water-filled route through the stone. And here is the honest state of our knowledge about those roots. Hydrologists find them by putting a harmless dye into water at a sinkhole and then watching springs, sometimes for weeks, to see where it comes out. That is the method. It is clever, and it works, and it is also a bit like trying to map a city by dropping something into a drain and waiting to see which manhole it appears from. What those traces have shown is that the underground drainage does not respect the surface. Water sinks on one side of a ridge and comes out on the other. It crosses under what looks on a map like a watershed boundary. In places, it travels distances measured in tens of miles. So the drainage map of the surface of the Ozarks, the one on every atlas, the one with the rivers on it, is not the drainage map of the Ozarks. There is a second one underneath, and it goes different places. Nobody has the full version. There is no complete atlas of the Ozark underground. What exists is a large collection of individual traces, cave surveys done by volunteers with tape and compass, and an enormous amount of blank space between them. And I want to be careful and honest here, because this is exactly the point where a lot of channels would start telling you about secret government facilities and things living down there. There is no evidence for any of that. The reason the Ozark underground is unmapped is not a conspiracy. It is that mapping it is genuinely, physically extremely hard. Most of it is flooded. Much of it is too tight for a human body. All of it is under private land in 1,000 different ownerships. And there has never been a budget for it, because a complete cave atlas does not obviously make anybody any money. That is a duller explanation than a cover-up. It is also worse in a way that matters more, because things that are not mapped are not protected. Everything that goes into the ground in the Ozarks goes somewhere. A septic system on a ridge, runoff from a feedlot, whatever is in a landfill, fertilizer off a field. It sinks into the karst and it enters that network. And because the network is fast, it does not filter the way water filters through ordinary soil over months and years. In a karst system, water can move through rock quickly enough that contamination arrives at a spring in days. That is why this matters to somebody with a well. If you draw your water from the Ozark aquifer, the water in your glass came through that unmapped network. It might have entered the ground 5 miles away. It might have entered 40 miles away, on the other side of a hill in a county you have never driven to, through a sinkhole in somebody's backfield that nobody has ever looked into. And there is no map that would tell you which. There are also the animals, which are the strangest part and get almost no attention. Isolated cave systems produce isolated populations. Cut a species off underground for long enough and it loses what it does not use. Eyes go first, pigment goes next. What is left is blind, pale, adapted to darkness and to almost no food. The Ozarks has these: cave fish, cave salamanders, blind crayfish, invertebrates found in one cave system and nowhere else on the planet, because that cave system has been their entire world for longer than our species has existed, which produces a genuinely uncomfortable thought. If there are caves in the Ozarks nobody has entered, and the evidence strongly suggests there are, then some of them contain populations of animals that have never been described, named, or seen. Not monsters, nothing dramatic, small pale things in the dark that we simply do not know about. Some of them will be gone before anybody finds them, from water that arrived through a passage nobody knew connected to anything. So that is the thing the Ozarks is hiding, and it is bigger than any story anybody could invent about it. Underneath the hills there is a second country. It has rivers. It has its own geography, which does not match ours. It has residents that have been separated from the surface for millions of years. It supplies the water that comes out of the ground at 13 million gallons a day and fills the rivers that everything up here depends on, and we have a partial sketch of it, assembled by volunteers, with most of the page blank. If you are on a well anywhere in this region, or if there is a cave or a sinkhole or a spring on ground your family owns, I would like to know where. Put the county in the comments. Between all of you, there is more knowledge of what is under the Ozarks than exists in any single office in the state. And that is not an exaggeration. It is just how this got surveyed.